Maybe. All right, so I'm going to open up with this reading. You know that I think we've done this last week too. I find something in here that pertains to what we're going to talk about today, and this was something that jumped out at me. So each day is a new day because I'm growing and unfolding. Why it is difficult sometimes to forgive others. Is it because what they did was so unforgivable? Or is it because I have become attached to negative memories through continually thinking about them? Releasing the past is the first step towards complete forgiveness. I can't let go when I realize that the words and actions of others are responses from their own beliefs, responsibilities, not mine. I am growing and unfolding at my own rate in a world where no two people think or feel in exactly the same way. Knowing this, I release the need to force everything or even anything to happen the way that I think it should. I'm growing and unfolding, so I trust the divine order at work. God's love assures me that regardless of the past, there is nothing I have done that can keep me from a new beginning. You must forgive, Luke 17:3. Okay? So we're going to talk about, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking mainly about chapters 8 and 9 in Richard Rohr's book. But I want to go back a little bit and just recap. You know, this is really the fourth week, right? And there's maybe a new face or two. So I just want to go back, right? We started off originally talking, and we had a challenge, right? We asked everybody to go and to give me something that they seek ease and comfort from, right? And the reason we did that was to determine whether you've experienced some powerlessness in your life. Ultimately, somewhere in your life where you've lost the power of choice and control, all right? We did that as an exercise basically to try to find some unmanageability in your life that this was causing, which then leads us to, a power that can help us and a power that then we would seek ease and comfort from. And that's what we talked about in step 2 mainly, right? We talked about, coming to believe, having this experience where it deepens, all right? And we talked about how we do that, right? We got to the third step where we decided we were going to turn our will and our life over to the care of God. Well, when we talked about the third step, though, we really got into what that looked like. And it was where a lot of people meet that with resistance because of the fact that they feel like they're giving up their own will, when in actuality, it's where we receive all the power, because all of a sudden we can do many things that we couldn't do now with God's power, all right? And that's where we got to, last week, where we really got into the nuts and bolts of things that can be blocking us from this power, all right? And that's what we talked about last week. We talked about this inventory, utilizing this inventory to put on paper things that are affecting us. Ultimately, resentments, fears, and relationship issues that we might have been having or have had, all right? In doing so, we identified fears from our resentments, okay? Some that could have been causing, when we also identified some harms, all right? And that's really where we're going today. It's why I wanted to recap a little bit. And then, I talked to you about how quick 6 and 7 kind of run and how important they are. And I went back over my notes last week, and I feel like I missed a couple things, and that's why I wanted to recap, right? One of the things that Richard Rohr talks about, and it's something that hit home for me with my own experience, right? He talked about, I think even the title of chapter 6 is the chicken or the egg, right? And that was my experience with God, right? My experience with God is, and what he's getting at in that is, do we basically seek God, or is God there? Okay, all right. Is the grace of God there and we're missing it, or does it appear when we look for it? All right. Now, my experience has been that it took me searching for God to see. God was always there. Okay, God was sitting, helping and saving my tuchus for most of my life, but I didn't have this relationship, and it took this work, okay? And that's where Richard Rohr talks about the sixth step being so important, because at this point, I've come to a realization of that. I've come to identify where God has been in my life the whole time and where I can do things for God to be more involved in my life, opposed to just, I always say this, I say it all the time, I'll say it again, right? I was told this a long time ago and it made a lot of sense to me. God will move mountains, but you better bring a shovel. Okay? And one of the things that I've talked about a few times is there's times where I'm so disconnected from God that I need to, I consider it searching for God, right? I do it by trying to help somebody else. And God he never lets me down. He always shows up. So it gets me emotional to think about it, because it's something that could have been so simple for so much of my life, but for whatever reason, there was this blockage. Okay, there was this blockage. I think I'll tell you a funny story. So Sunday, I was fortunate enough to go to my friend's house. He has a beautiful backyard. We had a beautiful day with the kids, and it was warm enough for the kids to go in the pool. And I am fighting with food now. I mean, it has become a major issue for me again, which is crazy, because it was something that I thought that I kind of worked through, and for whatever reason, I'm seeking ease and comfort through food again. However, not identifying this, right? Like we talked about, I'm not identifying it. So Sunday, we go to this barbecue, we eat, we have a great time, but we ate early. And by the time we got home, it got later in the day. We didn't do our regular routine of everybody sitting down having dinner because the kids kind of ate. So 8:30 comes and I'm starving, okay? I'm starving. I actually, my mind is telling me I'm going to die if I don't order Domino's, right? I'm literally going to wither away to nothing and die. So I'm having this experience, right? And I'm fighting this in the mind, right? The mind is just working on me, you got to eat. You deserve to eat. You should eat. Well, what are you going to do? You're not going to eat? So it was like a light bulb went off. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm talking to other people about seeking ease and comfort. How am I not going to God? Right? So I had this moment where I just sat there and I went into prayer and I asked God to remove this obsession, and it was gone. Okay? It was gone. But this is the best part of the story. 9:30 comes. Okay? Lauren's upstairs and texts me and says, "Did you order anything? Because I'm starving." So now I have, a co-signer of this experience, okay? And now obviously I'm going to go to the app and I'm going to order some pizza. So now remember, I asked God to help me here. So I go to the app, which I've used, by the way, for years, and I've never had a problem. And the app won't let me order food. Okay?
Big guy.
Lauren comes down the stairs and says, "What are we doing? Did you order food?" Because at that point I texted her and said, "Fine, I'll order some food." She comes down the stairs. I said, "No, I had a problem with the app. I'm aggravated." And I was downstairs in the kids' playroom actually watching something. And she came down the stairs and I said, "The app won't work." She said, "Well, why don't you call?" I said, "Well, I didn't call because my card that I got to use is upstairs." "Well, you should have texted me. I would have brought the card down." I said, "Here we go." So she goes upstairs. She gets the card. She comes down. And I call up. And the guy says 30, 40 minutes. And I put in my $40 order for Domino's, which is probably just a disgusting amount of food that a human being should eat. And 30, 40 minutes, the guy says it'll come. So I'm sitting on the couch anticipating the Domino's guy, right? An hour and 5 minutes goes by, okay? An hour and 5 minutes goes by, there's no pizza. So I called Domino's. I said, "Listen, what's going on?" Calmly, obviously. And the guy says, "Listen, we're really, really jammed up. We're backed up." And the guy didn't even bring your pizza. He didn't even leave yet with your pizza. I said, "Listen, do me a favor. If you don't mind, cancel the order," right? Because it was getting late. At this point, it was 11 o'clock. So anyway, the moral of the story is this. I believe, and I did an exercise in step work of what I believe God to be. It's a really good exercise to do. What I believe God to be, okay? And then what do I want God to be, All right. It was an interesting exercise because obviously my preconceived notion of God for many years was this punishing, overseeing, the ideas of Santa Claus. I mean, let's face it, that's really the idea that I had, right? Naughty or nice list, was I doing? And when I wrote what I wanted God to be, one of the things that I wrote in there was I wanted God to have a sense of humor. Okay. And like right before I was going to bed, I had this, like aha moment where I'm like, he was just laughing the whole time, right? I asked him for help, shuts the app down. The guy ain't coming, and like, it's experiences like that where like, I got goosebumps. God, if I ask God to show up, he shows up. Now, some would argue that and say, well, was it God or was it just the app was down and the place was busy? I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Yeah, and it really, it doesn't matter to me ultimately because I know deep in my heart what it was, And so with that being said, right, I've done this, I'm identifying now these character defects that exist in my life. Okay, now I battle with these character defects pretty regularly, all right? I'm even identifying some stuff now. Like one of the things that I always think is interesting is God almost presents stuff to me in phases. It's almost like he knows that I'll be overwhelmed, all right? Because I live my life, most of it overwhelmed. So like I'll identify some character defects later on that I may not have identified earlier. And when we get to step 7, which we'll talk about in here, where we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings, which is ultimately the things that these character defects are causing, okay? They're the shortcomings. When you think about humbly asking him, okay, it's the switch. It's the same switch we talked about in the 3rd step of me basically surrendering, okay? And believing the fact that I don't have the power to remove these things. Like there's been a lot of mix-up, especially in Alcoholics Anonymous, where people say, well, you could work on them. I don't know. My experience has been that when I identify it and then I ask God to help me, it works itself out. And that's where I really believe step 7, what step 7 is ultimately about. It's humbly going to God, right? Like in a crazy way, I'm humbly going to God that day, sitting on that couch, begging him to, help me here because I don't have the power. I can't stop. I am going to order pizza, right? So that sounds like a silly example, but how many other areas of our life can we do that? How many other areas of our life can we go to God at that moment of either confusion, indecision? I think that's where I come, I'm assuming someone told me that because believe me, I'm not that bright. Where I say when I got to make a decision, right, what would Jesus do? I needed to get into that mindset of what would Jesus do. It made it so simple for me. And that's at a point now where that goes through my head, I don't know, 10, 15 times a day, So we talk about now's when we get to, we inventoried ourselves, okay? We see some of these things that are blocking us from God, all right? Now, this is where the alcoholic, the drug addict, the person who it was more in their face has a little bit of an advantage against the regular earthling, as I like to say. Mm-hmm. Because of the fact that the damage that I did piled up. It's very apparent and easy to see, okay? I don't even need to go into it. We talked about it the first week, wrecked a marriage, wasn't a good dad, wasn't a good husband. I did all that, okay? Had business part. I just did not live a God-centered life. I lived a self-centered life for so many years. So now there's a pile of mess. And what we talk about now in the 8th step is, now I got to make a list, okay? Most of it can come from my 4th step. Because when we went through the mechanics of the 4th step last week, I showed you how like this issue I had with my dad actually came back to a harm that I caused my dad and a harm that I caused my mom. So they immediately go on my list, all right? Mom, dad, I need to make an amends to them. And then we go through that inventory. We look to anywhere that we put harm at the bottom of that page. Those are the first people we get on that list. And we really think about some other people. I mean, I've harmed some people that maybe I wasn't resentful at, or maybe I wasn't, I didn't have a bad relationship with. And we make that list, right? I found that I had to be directed through some of this, and I'm still struggling with making some amends. I still have some amends right now that I'm still in the process of trying to get to a point working with somebody to make them, okay? But I had to write down what I thought I did wrong. And most of the time it helped when somebody else tweaked that a little bit with me. Because the way that I perceive the scenario or the situation may not actually be the way it is. Or maybe I got to make sure I throw in a little bit that they did. That's not what this is about. This is about what did I do to that person, okay? And what Richard Rohr talks about, and I love it, is that when you get to the next process, which is actually going out and making amends, he talks about the humanity of Jesus, right? Something I always talk about. I talk about how my relationship with Jesus has changed in the sense that I had to stay on the humanity side for so long because I didn't necessarily believe on the divinity side, right? I struggled with that for so long. Now that's changed, that's evolved. But initially, I had to believe that Jesus was this guy that walked the earth and did good stuff, and I want to be like him. That was it. That's how simple I had to keep it, okay? Whether he was the Son of God, born of the Virgin Mary, I needed to sort that out, okay? Now, all of that has changed for me. But one of the things that Jesus did was whenever he did something with somebody, it was physical. Now, obviously, there wasn't FaceTime. Back then. I don't think they were walking around with iPhones, but everything that he did was face-to-face, all right? So direct amends is really, really important, all right? I was talking to someone prior to the meeting about, an amends that they're going to make, okay? And they're going to use a letter, which is a great approach to an amends, all right? But and there's a distance between them. My recommendation is to do that using FaceTime. So you can at least look at each other, okay? And that person could then see the emotion that you may feel through the amends, and you could also see their reaction to the amends, okay? Because remember, part of this, and we'll talk a little more about the mechanics of it, is I'm gonna go to them and say, hey, here's what I think I did. Why don't you tell me, is there anything that I missed? Okay, now, I had made an amends to my mother, and I talked about this, that, when I gave her the opportunity to tell me what I missed, get ready for a long conversation. And I had to just sit there and yeah, there were times I wanted to defend myself, and I wanted to, but that's not what this was about. This was about, I believe till this day that our relationship changed that day, okay? I do. I believe that there was a lot of things that just, we're done with them. We're done with them. Even though she's, this person that will rehash things. For me, a lot of the stuff that she'll rehash now doesn't have the same power. It doesn't. I feel like it's something that we've moved forward on. Okay. Now I've made an amends to my dad. That amends keeps coming up. Okay. I think there's a lot more there. So that's something that, I need to look at. Okay. For alcoholics and drug addicts, financial amends are riddled. All right. There's people that we did really, really bad things to, and we need to right those wrongs. Right. But the freedom that comes through this process, and I would tell everybody here, right? The first week, the challenge was tell me something that ease and comfort. Then we got into, do a little bit of an inventory of yourself and see if there's some things that maybe you'd like to change or people that you're resentful at. I would find it hard to believe that in this room, you don't have somebody that you think that you need to make an amends to. And God bless you if you don't, okay? But I think that if you really dig deep and you ask God to see your truth, okay, there will be something that you need to make an amends for, okay? And that amends, could also be, I had to go make an amends to my grandmother because I was so angry with my grandmother because some of the things she did to my father. And she was dead. She was dead since I was 12 years old. So that was a letter that had to be, had to be written and, and read at her grave. That's what that amends was. And, I wasn't struck with lightning when I walked away. I will tell you, it doesn't have the power that it had. So where we're at really now is, hopefully that list is really short, okay? And if it's not, that's fine too. But to really get the freedom that comes out of this, okay, you have to think about, are there relationships that you can mend, okay? Which is obviously part of the word amend. Are there relationships that you want to approach somebody and be different? And they will be. They will be. And the important part here is to, and Richard Rohr talks about, it's not about going to them. It's not about getting into a heated debate of what you did and what I did. It's about, hey, look, here's what I did. That's it. Here's what I did. Now, some people, okay, especially people that are a little bit more God-centered and spiritual, they might say, hey, you know what? I probably could have done things a little bit differently too. And that's nice when somebody says that, okay? I've also made an amends where somebody didn't, I think I talked about it last week, right? Jimmy and Rob Caulfield, they were two friends of mine. They do not want to talk to me, okay? I've approached them numerous times. They do not want to talk to me. Now, it's suggested to me to one of them I need to make financial amends to is to just start putting money in an envelope and sending it, all right? I don't know what that'll warrant, you know what I mean? Maybe, that's something I really need to consider now is writing a letter and, making it something that, obviously I can afford and starting that process. What I will tell you is for my own experience, I ran into somebody who was on an amends list that I decided I wasn't going to. I decided, by the way, right? So God gave me the power to write the amends list. Put this name, right? If I believe that this list is from God, well, then I should be making at least the approach and have the willingness to make every one of these amends. I decided that I was going to make a couple, okay? And I bumped into one of those people on the boardwalk I guess it was about 2-3 summers ago, before COVID. And I felt this big, okay? All the things that I had been working to and feeling better about myself and felt like I was living in the sunlight of the Spirit, and I went back to being that fearful, shameful, guilty, all those things rehashed in a second. Just by seeing that one person that, and this book gives you tons of warnings where it basically tells us, half measures avail us nothing. And I can tell you that I experienced that. I experienced that because everything that I did was gone in that moment. Gone. So, so again, this is something that it's still something that I work on. It's still something that I'm struggling with. But one of the things that I wanted to read from here is the one goal of the 12 steps is you get through 1 through 9, all right? And really that's where, you do a lot of work, all right? With God's help, you do a lot of work. And it's through the next 3 that, the people like to call them the maintenance steps, all right? I would consider them the growth steps because I believe that you grow, right? You grow through prayer and meditation. You grow through helping others. You grow through continuing to take an inventory. And we're going to really talk next week about what you talked about, how that was making you feel. I think Richard Rohr in chapter 10, I'm sure you read it, but I would read that again, where he really nails the point of what the idea behind an inventory is at night. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about constructively not having to write another 4th step. Right? Not developing this resentment. I have an opportunity at that second to repair it. All right. Some people actually, you'll get people in AA that'll say that the actual work that you do at night, that's actually 11-step work. Okay. That the 10th step is more of immediate, right? When you can make an immediate amends. All right. Where if you identify it right away, I've had that experience, and I really try to live by that. I mean, I had that experience with almost something that happened in here where it was really important for me to make an amends right after it. I had to talk to somebody. I felt like, we were kind of off a little bit, and I wanted to talk to that person. I wanted to give them an opportunity to tell me maybe I, said something that really bothered them, and I had to really think about that. Okay, it was important to me. Right, that was, an immediate amends. I do think that it's tough sometimes when you write this list. For me, it was because I wanted to move on, right? I wanted to move on. All of a sudden, I have this God in my life. I really started to feel the power of God. Things just started to fall into place. Like I wasn't fighting anymore. And now it's like, oh, well, now you got to do all this, And I fell short of that. I think there's a lot of times that one of the reasons why I balked at some of that was because, I'm like a feel-good junkie. And I wanted to stay in that feeling good. And some of these are tough. Now, the other part, though, is that when you do it, it's the rewards are unbelievable, but yet, for whatever reason, we hold back, okay? I don't know. It's one of those things where, I do believe that when the pain gets great enough, you'll take action. What I think is hard is it's a matter of life or death for somebody like me. It's maybe not a matter of life or death for somebody like you. Just saying. I don't know anybody's specific situation, right? But whether or not you go out and make this amends to somebody, your life will probably go on the way it is. What I would encourage you to really consider is, do you want a deeper relationship with God? Do you want to have full faith and trust in God? Because if there's something that's sitting there, and that even when we're talking about this, something that's just, it's like, hey, you know what? Yeah, there is that person. There is that thing. All right? I would encourage you to dig deeper and ask God to reveal that to you. Because the what can come out of that, you never know. One of the blessings that we have in places like Alcoholics Anonymous is we get to hear these things. That's the beauty of going to meetings, the beauty of getting to hear these stories that people tell of beautiful amends experiences and what's come out of that. I said from the beginning that I believe with all my heart that this book was written divinely, right? I gave you a little background on the person who they, credit as the author of this book. And I, although a very good writer, I don't think that where he was in sobriety and the life that he lived, because, he was a disaster. And, I mean, he tells you about it. Some of the things that are written in here, just, they're beautiful. And one of the things is, for a long time, I used to, we read these at meetings, right? And one of the things that's tough about when we read them at meetings is we call them the promises, okay? And there's a bunch of promises that are throughout this book, all right? But one of the things that I think when you say what they really are, which is the 9th step promises, it changes it a little bit. Because up to this point, we just did all those things that I talked about. Right? We discovered that thing that is making our lives unmanageable. We started to deepen this relationship with God. We clean these things out that are blocking us from God, okay? We're not really, we don't have this direct line, right? I always use the example of the light bulb, right? I could tell you that example, it's something that holds so true for me. If you think of a light bulb in a socket and it's half in, half out, if you turn that light bulb just a little bit, the light goes on, okay? And if you turn it the other way a little bit, the light goes off. And I can tell you that my relationship with God, I mean, that's it sometimes. That's it. This little subtleness, the light goes on, okay? So, and that's what we're trying to do, right? Some people may think that some of this is crazy, right? I'm asking you to write a couple things, and I get it. But what our goal from the beginning, and what the reason that Richard Rohr wrote this book, was that he saw the treasure that the 12 steps can bring you to, right? We always have that debate that there's people in AA that consider the steps the actual treasure, but that's not really what it was designed to do, right? They're the treasure map to get you to God. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do in Good Shepherd here. I know for me, it's having a deeper relationship with God. It's about having full faith and trust. It's about living in the kingdom of God. And I can't do that. I can't do that if I have resentments. I can't do that if I have amends to make. It's hard for me. It's hard for me. So that's why we're doing it. So the reason I even mention this is that, I say about divinely written is I want to read to you these promises because, let me see if I can find them because ultimately I have stuff marked off. I have a lot of stuff marked off here. Hold on. All right, so basically I want to start right here. So think about what he's saying here, right? Let's go backwards a little bit. Some people in here might be like, well, you're crazy. I'm not doing this, right? And I get it. And that's why I encourage you, please ask God for the help. He'll provide it, right? Now listen to the verbiage, right? If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, right? So this development, what are we developing? We're developing a relationship with God. So if we're painstaking, we don't want to do it, okay? We will be amazed before we are halfway through, all right? Now, for me, that was very, I remember going to making amends to my mom and dad and getting through just a few amends and, realizing that there was this weight off me, okay? So I've experienced that, okay? We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We are not going to regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity. We will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness, self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. We suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. I mean, I know me at 3 years sober wouldn't have had the ability to see that, all right, to see and promise these things. So I'm gonna kind of change gears a little bit. So Michael, who some people know, him and his mom come to church, and he comes with, right, me and Michael have a relationship, and he's given me permission to break his anonymity, okay? Which, is something that, to be fair, that's a gift that people have. So, he's willing to kind of share that with people. So I want to talk about the God story. I have so many God stories, I promise you. And I want to just share this God story because it's something that I might even get emotional during that. So we meet each other. We don't meet each other. Let me back up. Let me start the story over. So my dad's a retired police officer in Hoboken, all right? And it turns out that I meet somebody, I'm not going to break his anonymity, who worked with my dad and is also in a fellowship. And when I meet that person, I was early, I might have been sober a year, all right? And he was giving me the key right there. He said, listen to me. You need to get out of yourself, stop being consumed with you, and start helping other people. And I was like, oh, how am I going to help other? What do I have to offer you? The mind tells me that I have nothing to offer. What good am I? What am I going to do for somebody? So he says, I'm going to give you the name of somebody, and you're going to call them, and they're down your way in Tom's River. So he gives me the name, and he calls the guy Nunz, N-U-N-Z, right? I put the guy's number in my phone. I put his name in my phone. I call the guy up. And the guy does not call me back. You know how mad that made me? No, I'm only kidding. So anyway, I go to a 7 a.m. meeting because at the time I was actually working for Carl's at the time. This is when I worked for Carl's early on. And I was working for Carl's at the time. And I used to go to a 7 a.m. meeting almost every day. And I go to this meeting and here's Michael, by the way, not Nunz, sharing about his experience that he's having basically circumstances that put him in a situation career-wise that he wasn't happy with. Right? He was he had a different career, and here he is. He was at the time he was actually working at Wawa. Right? So he shares. He announces himself as Michael. Circumstances be, I'm on Route 9. I'm in the Carl's van. I pull up to Wawa on Route 9, and Michael's outside, basically ready to quit his job and blow his top off. All right, he's had enough. He had enough at 7 a.m. This is 12 o'clock in the afternoon. He's got his Wawa apron on, and he's had enough. All right, and I put my windows down, and I hear it. Now, I don't know him, okay? But I just remembered someone telling me that I really got to get out of myself, and I need to, and it was uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. I didn't sit there, but again, I didn't even have this skill then, okay? It wasn't running through my head. What would Jesus do? Would Jesus get out of the car and go talk to somebody that maybe would relate to me because of the fact that, especially if I said, hey, look, I saw you at that 7 a.m. meeting. We have something, a bond that ties us together. Luckily, even though I didn't have that skill yet or that little tool I use, I got out of the car and I did something that I normally didn't want to do. All right, and I said, hey, listen, man, how you doing? I said, my name's David. I saw you at the 7 a.m. meeting. You look all wound up. You all right? And, it was real simple. And he's like, yeah, But his attitude at that point changed, too. He was kind of like, oh, all right, maybe there's somebody here that I could talk to, And I just remember the only thing I had, right, was because somebody told me this, because I said this early on when we started doing this, that my mind will tell me to quit my job, leave leave Lauren, leave the kids, go to Florida. In any given moment, right, my mind will tell me the craziest things. So someone just said to me that to learn how to start to control my mind was to say, okay, I don't have to do that today. I can do that tomorrow. That's all I had. That's all I had in my toolbox for him. So I said, hey, Mike, listen, it sounds like, you're worked up and you really want to quit your job. I said, why don't you just wait till tomorrow? And he just looked at me, probably was like, stick it up your ass. I'm not sure, but that's what, And I said, hey, man, listen, why don't you give me your number? And that's kind of something that you do in AA. Everybody gives each other's numbers. And he gives me his number. And when I put his number in my phone, it's nuns. Oh. All right? So, and this is where I'll get emotional, because I went back to my car and thought to myself, and you don't even know this, what if I didn't get out of the car? How many times does God give me the opportunity to get out of the car and I don't get out of the car? Think about it. How many times were these experiences that I didn't take advantage of? So that's why I tell you that story, not only to introduce Michael, but also to think about the amends. Is there an opportunity that people in this room they're not opening the door? I don't know. Only you'll be able to figure that out, depending on how deep you want to get into this. Okay?
Just real quick, when did you start this whole journey with the 12 steps? Like, how long have you been, like...
So the reality is, I started this 20 years ago and bumped my head against the wall for many, many years. I will, God willing, I celebrated 5 years. Rather than say I celebrated 5 years in January. Okay? And this was probably 4 years ago. And then to really, really stamp the relationship, I do not tell him to go to Good Shepherd. I'm sitting in Good Shepherd one day, and here he comes walking in with his mom. So if you don't think that the dots align and God's pulling the strings, I don't know what to tell you. But I had asked Michael today to share one of his amends experiences. I don't know, I don't even know the experience he's going to share with us, but I just asked because he's done some amends, and I said, maybe there's been an amends that has really moved you, and you would like to, share it with this group.
Yes.
Michael.
How you doing, everyone? First of all, thank you. I think that was a great presentation, and you hit a lot of bullet points that I was going to pretty much talk about. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, clearly, you want to stop drinking. That's the obvious. And what was taught to me from current sponsors is that that book is designed to put my hand in your hand, into God's hand. It's developing that relationship, which is that power that's going to solve my issues and my problems. Because that is the solution. In fact, they only talk about alcohol for not too many pages. As part of the recovery, a lot of it is a solution, which is God, and So very quickly, I don't want to take up too much time, but like you said, those steps are designed. I mean, you don't have to be alcoholic. Those steps could help someone's spirituality grow and to get closer to God. That's basically what they are, what they're designed for. However, and you touched on this too, for a guy like me, it's like a life preserver, pretty much. Like you could decide to do this, and if you want to enhance your spiritual life, more power to you. For me, it's going to save my life. With that being said, this is a very powerful and vicious and an aggressive illness that destroys families, jobs, careers, and stuff like that. I have made it to the 9th step, amends, and here's my experience. I love to preach, but I'm not going to preach and talk about opinions. But my experience is my experience. So my son's mother, who I met, I was like a year and a half sober. I met her like in 2010, 11. And she had a son. He was graduating 8th grade. And, I quickly fell in love with his mother. And now we have a son together. And he's 7. But she had, him with a previous marriage. And his father was never around. In fact, he couldn't leave Portugal because of legal reasons. He got involved with some bad things. And he's so his son never really had a relationship with his father. And so I kind of stepped in and I stuck around for 9 years. However, when I was living up north in New York, when things were going good, and I was taken through the book for the first time, the step work, and I had made an amends to her son. Because when we had, I had picked up. Now, when I pick up alcohol, the man sitting here right now and the man that's under the influence is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You do not want to be around me. I can promise you. Just take my word for it. And so when I'm under the influence, I act, in behaviors that I wish I could take back, but I can't. I say a lot of things that I don't mean, that are hurtful, which you can't take back. Offending his mom, not coming home. I was living in my in-laws' house downstairs with, his mother and, and their family. And so I had gotten back on the beam and I had put some time together and I got to my amends step and he comes downstairs. I said, do you have some time to come downstairs? And we sat down and I tried to make things right, and shared that, about hurting his mom and whatever I had said at the time, and not acting accordingly and being disrespectful to your mother, your grandma and grandfather who was running the house, and that's literally their house, home, and, disrespecting their daughter and whatever it was. And I said what I had to say, and then you got to be quiet and let the other person say what they have to say. And this guy, I forgot how old he was at the time. He was a young man. He was in his teens, and he starts telling me he starts breaking down, the kid, crying hysterically. I love you like a father, and. My mother's over the moon about you, and, I just want to see you do the right, and he's bawling. And I start bawling. I mean, talk about like emotional. And, I know it's like, my father was 10 minutes away from me. We had a strained relationship, but his father, like, he had no contact with. I mean, it was overseas. It was phone calls only. And he has a very, very He's very resentful at his dad, but nonetheless. So I make this amends, but now here's where it differentiates from the alcoholic and to an earthling, like you said. You see, I made that amends and I didn't continue to stay sober. So, it's like you go there and you pour your soul out and you want to make things right and you try, you feel sorry for what you did, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you don't continue on that behavior of God-centered and staying sober and continuing on that path, and then you pick up again and you go down that slope again and you act the same way towards his mom, and it's repeated. That's where it gets like, people tend to get like, they're just words. So now it's not about what I say anymore. What I say, it means nothing to a lot of people, mostly my family. Not talking about, people that I owe money to, like lawyers and, ex-girlfriends from years ago in high school, whatever, in family court. I mean, I have a list too of people that I owe. I have to make some wrongs right. But like, the ones that are close and nearby to me, they don't want to, talk is cheap. Right, so it's pretty much about my actions from here on out, So I was at, and I'm going to wrap this up because I'm a little bit foggy too, and I'm a little hypersensitive right now. But I was at a meeting the other day. I was in Belmar. There's a meeting right on the beach. It's called the Shoreline Club, and it's a great place. I love it. And this biker comes in, tattoos all over the place, the helmet under his arm and everything. And I'm like, what's this guy going to talk about? And this guy talks about how, like, this whole movement is about an altruistic movement. It's about getting out of myself. I'm an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. I used to put on big watches, rings, drive fancy cars, nice designer clothes. But I was broken inside, take women out to fine restaurants, take them, wine them, dine them. And, but I was broken. It was just a mask. It was a facade. And, so I don't know where I was going with that, but, basically, I got this sponsor now who's, we're working really close on,
Biker.
yeah, the biker. The biker, yeah, he starts talking about, thank you. He starts talking about how, that his shift changed when he started putting himself last. And for me, I'm a very, I have like, they diagnosed me with ADHD. Like I have to read something 10 times over to remember it. So I try to keep things real simple. God, you, me, in that order. And when he said that, it made a lot of sense. So, and I think that's where the shift changes. So for the alcoholic and not anybody who is not non-alcoholic, but if I don't, what happens is that when I make a few amends, I get some elation and I start to feel good. And they go pretty well, but I let my foot off the gas. I got money in my pocket. I got a great job. I don't need meetings. I'll make those amends some other time. I sit back and relax, and this illness talks. And I got a disease where the mind is out to ambush me. It tells me, after a year of sobriety, which I just relapsed after a year, you could have a beer. And I have the beer. I convinced myself that I could just have a beer. And I go on a 3-week bender. So, with that being said, for the alcoholic, this is something that's very, you have to be, it's an aggressive illness, and this has to be done with vigilance. Or else, I'm lucky to be sitting here. God actually has other plans for me, obviously, and he's given me another shot. So, I think that's all I got.
Michael, thank you. So a couple things that Mike said that I just we're going to wrap this up. Right, I said we're going to wrap up a little early today. So one of the things you talked about initially, which the book gives it a name, is a design for living. Right, this is a design for living. There's actually a group, or a couple groups named that. All right, and that's how we believe it to be. People like Michael and myself, we believe that this is the only way that we can live. We also believe, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this whole exercise was that I believe that everybody could benefit from it, which also Richard Rohr believed also. Okay? The other thing he talked about, and this is what we'll wrap on, is for me, and probably for a couple people in here, I wouldn't doubt it, it's about that having that experience, being able to sit with somebody eye to eye, face to face. But then it's about what you do after that. And that's what Michael talked about, right? It's about the next phases of that, right? When I went and sat with my mom and dad, every talk would have been cheap there. Yes, we had a great experience. But if I didn't go on this path of really trying to be better, it probably would have, let me tell you something. They still refeel the things I've done for them. 5 years of sobriety is not going to make up for the sleepless nights and the crashing cars, and it's not going to do that. And I got to be realistic about that. Okay? However, I get to every single day do things, right? My father and my mother call me, whether we disagree on things politically, whatever it may be, they call me, I'm there. And that goes for a lot of other people. I mean, I have some people in my life that don't necessarily want, like my ex-wife does not want me in her life. It's just, it's understandable, okay? It's understandable. What do? Whatever she needs done. That's it. She does not want to sit and talk, and she doesn't care about any of that no more. The only thing I can do is be the best dad I can to those kids.
And that's the important thing.
And, and when she calls or she needs something or she needs me to watch the kid, yes. The answer is yes. Obviously, I got to be careful sometimes because I could say yes all the time. This isn't about beating myself. I have to have a life too. But, yes.
I'd like to address the fact that Michael brought out that this is a disease. People forget that. It's a disease. If somebody said to you, I have cancer and I'm getting chemotherapy, you're there and you're saying, what can I do? What can I do to help you? We hear somebody is an alcoholic and we go, oh God.
Just stop.
Forgetting that it's a disease.
Just stop.
It's
that simple.
Gee, thanks.
It's,
No kidding.
I thought of that.
I have two daughters who are nurses in the healthcare field, and my heart goes out to people like Michael who they get a label. They get a label without giving them a chance. We forget it's not a thing, it's a disease. Thank you for sharing, Michael.
You're welcome.
And just know that Good Shepherd is here for you.
I know that.
And that's,
Yeah.
this little building has really helped a lot of us get through a lot of things, and we're happy to have you come here.
Thank you. I actually, real quick, with this new sponsor that I have to devote 15 minutes of, first prayer, and meditate for 15 minutes, which is just get quiet.
Just quiet.
Just quiet. Don't gotta be candles lit and incense burning and a guided meditation.
Right.
He just wants me to sit.
That's it.
And then you just listen.
Yep.
And something came to me to call Mother Donna. And I called Mother Donna, and George, I was at Mass Sunday, talked about how he needed hands around the church, and shame on me. And I didn't give my number then, but that's what meditation does. You sit quiet, and God talks to you. I called Mother Donna. I said, I want George's number. I want to be of help. I come here, I go to my Mass, and then I walk out, I receive my communion, and I'm done. And I live a mile away. There's no reason why I can't do more. And it, something clicked where I need to get more active, and help out. So
And so that's like for the rest of us, if we're not talking about only just making amends or dealing with the demons of alcoholism, but being open to what God wants us to do,
Yep.
to say, what would Jesus do? Or, all of us have those good intentions. We think, and when we think of someone, sometimes we think of someone because God is sending that message to us, call somebody, make contact, and we have that intention. We don't always act on it. And that may be one of those, for us, one of those missed opportunities to just, be that servant, to do, to serve what that person needs. Because that's really, I think, maybe why we're all here, to what would Jesus do? To be, not to attend Mass on Sunday and not eat meat on Friday, but to follow what Jesus would have us do, to be Christ-like, like the Christ, and try to make that a pattern in our everyday life with the people that we encounter, or the people in our lives that we would not encounter unless we act on that little whatever it is that is nudging us to do something, to reach out, or or to just listen, or to be, right?
I think of that as the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I tell you now, the Holy Spirit has been so present in our lives. The reason we walked into this little church in the first place, we have a dear friend, Father Paul, that has a church up in Kearney, and he said, "Well, girls, if you're moving down to Tom's River, why
Wow.
don't you go check out Good Shepherd?"
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
We were church shopping. And, we stopped here first. We
That's
stopped
right.
here first, and we never went on.
Right.
We
They
never-
said that to me, they said, well, we're kind of shopping. And I said, please come back.
We made you a good,
Anyone who
we
told
made
us
you a
it
good
was a
sign and
weekend?
drive deal. We gave you a good sign and drive deal. You didn't need to go to any other dealership.
And
You
we
know,
live close too. I mean, we're within a mile from here.
that's
so
awesome. That's
And
awesome.
It's
so
just been such a
It's
good.
been such a blessing in our lives,
It's
I
awesome.
can honestly say. But that is what I think of it as. That is the Holy Spirit.
Yeah,
You can-
I agree
it's
with you.
God.
Palpable
I
in
agree
this
with you.
church when you walk in, there's
Yes.
something there. And the
So-
Holy Spirit is that.
So I'm going to close with this, right along those lines. Like Michael having that meditation. I just want to go over the chain of events of thinking about this, right? Michael having that meditation. Donna calls me yesterday. I have a relationship with Michael, right? Who we talk pretty regularly. I mean, I would say we talk at least once a week in depth, right? I know what's going on in his life. He knows what's going on in my life. I had a softball game. I'm driving home. I just talked to Donna. A little voice said to me, well, why don't you call Michael? Michael's done some amends. Why don't you see if Michael would want to come here today? Michael then tells me the story of how he wants to get more active at Good Shepherd. So, like, if you don't see the
Connections.
it's just the eyes aren't open. That's all, and that's what I think we do
called
with this.
sleepwalking.
Yep. So I want to thank everybody again. I think that next week, which would be June
For June 1st.
June 1st.
First, and then.
Okay. Yeah. So I think we're probably only going to have two. I know we had said there was a possibility of the 15th, but I think we're going to wrap this up on June 8th.
Okay.
All right. So there'll be two more. Next week we'll do 10, 11, and 12. We'll really probably do 10 and some of 11, and then really save working with others, which is what we really want to dive into at Good Shepherd. All right.
Yes.
Thank you again. I love everybody.
Michael, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, 4 o'clock.